The following video features some of the most brutal animal attacks on record. These true stories include the gruesome story of a man who was found half-eaten by 7 Nile monitor lizards, the story of another lion who consumed 6 people in the span of 2 months, and much more. You're watching what are among the most brutal animal attacks on record. In many parts of the world, wild and potentially dangerous animals are held in captivity and used as drawing cards for tourism. On the surface, these arrangements seem harmless, especially when the animals are cared for and visitors are able to learn about them at close range. But more often than not, wild animals give in to their natural instincts, and in these primal moments, we witness what happens when man tries to tame the innately untamable. This episode takes us to a game reserve in South Africa near the small town of Cullinan, where a man was mauled to death by the lions that he raised ever since they were cubs. Hit that like and subscribe button if you're new. You're watching When Animals Attack. The Mahala View Lodge is nestled in the Conservancy just 25 miles from the capital, in the Gauteng province. The lodge was owned by Leon van Biljon, who lived on site with his family. Among the inhabitants of the privately owned Bushveld escape were 3 captive lions named Rambo, Katrine, and Nikita, who all stayed in enclosures on the property. The conservancy in which the lodge is located borders the Dinokeng Game Reserve, a 74,000-acre park that attracts many visitors to the area to view the Big Five, plains game, as well as an array of other animals that roam the savanna grasslands in this high-felt Shangri-La. In addition to its idyllic accommodations, game drives, and conference facilities, the lodge also offers exclusive lion lectures and feedings. Van Biljon became known as the Lion Man, and photographs would reveal the close and interactive relationship he shared with his lions. It was clear that there was little fear between them, as the boundary between man and beast seemingly dissolved. According to South African law, indigenous wild animals like lions can be kept for exhibition purposes provided the owner has a valid permit. Interestingly, the permit holder does not need to be a certified or trained wildlife expert. This means that anyone who has the funds to house a lion, satisfy its basic living requirements, and secure the necessary permit is legally able to own one of the most feared predators on the planet. Crowned the king of the jungle, the mighty lion is ironically no stranger to human domination. In fact, for centuries, people have tried to tame and domesticate this iconic member of the cat family, from Middle Eastern sheikhs and royals to circus performers and big cat enthusiasts. In South Africa, most captive lions live in zoos, wildlife parks, and even sanctuaries, where the primary business is usually tourism. Visitors to these facilities are treated to close interactions and often marvel at the level of domestication exhibited by the lions. And while seemingly successful to the layman, animal behavior experts understand that wild animals can never truly be tamed. And moreover, keeping wild animals in captivity often leads us to negative ecological impact, not to mention the ethical considerations for essentially caging an animal that is meant to roam territories of up to 150 square miles. And another factor that has recently grown in relevance is that contact between wild animals and humans may facilitate spread of zoonotic diseases, and we all now know how that can turn out. So while disease is not a factor in this story, it nevertheless ends in tragedy. The Biljon family acquired the property in 1985 and built the lodge from the ground up, which they named Mahala View Lodge. Somewhat controversially, Mahala is the Zulu word for something that has been obtained without payment or effort. Van Biljon's 2 daughters would grow up at the lodge, and in 2006, he acquired 4 lion cubs, 2 males and 2 females. One of the males was sold shortly after being acquired, and the 3 remaining cubs would be raised on the property, even sleeping with their owners. The lions would eventually grow to become special attractions at the lodge, drawing in visitors which included school groups. Van Biljon would teach the children and other guests about lions and their relationship with God. On one fateful August afternoon towards the end of the South African winter in 2019, a 70-year-old Van Biljon entered the enclosure of the lions he called his children. He had grown used to being inside the enclosure with them, feeling confident in the bond that they had formed over the 30 years that the lions had been under his care. As Van Biljon turned his back to mend a fence that was broken, one of the lions pounced on his back, digging its sharp claws into his shoulders and piercing its teeth into the back of his neck. Emergency services were alerted, as well as neighboring staff and landowners who rushed to the lodge to offer assistance. 2 of the lions had already been shot by the time the ambulance arrived, but the paramedics could not access the enclosure until all 3 lions were killed. By the time they got to Van Biljon, he was covered in blood and had already succumbed to his injuries. And in just a moment, an instant that mirrored many others across the country, the captor became the victim. The lodge would go on to confirm the death of the Lion Man on its Facebook page that read, "Great loss for everyone. Rest in peace, Uncle Leon." and this was written without any mention of the 3 lions that had been executed and been part of the family for over a decade. As the public eventually got wind of what happened, thoughts and sympathies from many would pour in for the Van Biljon family, and animal rights groups expressed their feelings about the outcomes for the lions, while conservation bodies highlighted the risks and impacts of keeping dangerous animals in captivity. Fiona Miles, the director of the animal welfare organization of Four Paws South Africa, would go on to express her condolences before stating that attacks can be avoided by not allowing unnecessary human-wildlife interaction. She would also go on to say that no matter how habituated or tame captive lions may seem, they remain unpredictable and instinctive, as at the end of the day, these are wild animals. Interestingly, Van Biljon's family seemed unmoved by the objections, having no regrets about living and working in close quarters with the lions. And while they were saddened by the loss of the patriarch, who was a respected member of the community, as well as their family, they were reportedly at peace, stating that he left the earth at the hands of his children. Van Biljon's daughter, Leonette Van Wyck, who was 46 at the time, later told reporters that she knew her father lived a very full life and had answered what they believed to be a calling from God, not only to raise lions, but to teach people about them. What's also really interesting to take away from this story is the frequency of such encounters. Although wildlife experts deem them inevitable, South Africa is the only country in the world that has 3 classes of lions. These are wild, managed, or captive. Roughly 8,000 lions are kept in private facilities across the country, and many end up being shot in canned trophy hunts, a highly controversial offshoot of the captive carnivore industry, whereby lions are amongst the animals hunted in confined spaces and have little to no chance of escape. And all of these activities, of course, are highly profitable and have resulted in a spike in animal attacks and fatal encounters over the last few decades. In fact, just 6 months before the Mahala View attack, a woman was mauled to death by a lion at the nearby Kevin Richardson Wildlife Sanctuary. And between 1996 and 2020, 58 lion attacks were recorded in South Africa alone, a third of which were fatal. Nearly all the fatalities involved lions, and 14 of the victims were children. What's worse yet is that these numbers don't even account for the large number of unreported incidents. In the wild, attacks by lions are rare, and just like other predators, lions are important players in the African ecosystems, as they play a vital role in controlling herbivore population numbers. But in captivity, their value is reduced to whatever profit they can generate for their owners, and animal rights activists and conservationists continue to strive for an end to the captive carnivore industry, and for legislation that allows lions and other indigenous animals to be wild and free, just as nature intended. If this episode piqued your interest, then our previous episode, featuring the most brutal grizzly bear attack of all time, is likely to do the same. You can find it on the end screen of this video. In the early days of 2002, Atlanta-Newcastle County Police were called to Ronald Huff's residence for a welfare check. His friends and neighbors had grown concerned about the otherwise punctual and by all accounts community-oriented man's unusual absence. The officers, expecting a routine house visit, were wholly unprepared for the life-changing sight that awaited them. They had discovered the 42-year-old ex-soldier's and mechanic's mutilated corpse laying in a sitting position on the floor as soon as they'd entered. It was being devoured by 7 large monitor lizards. Hit that like and subscribe button if you're new. You're watching When Animals Attack. When the police arrived at Ronald Huff's home on that fateful day, they would be met with a sight that defied comprehension. A total of 7 large monitor lizards roamed freely throughout the house, their bodies covered in their owner's blood. They had been feasting on his corpse. Realizing that they were ill-equipped to handle the situation, the officers would then call for a team of experts. Nile monitor lizards, scientifically known as Varanus niloticus, are renowned for their impressive size. The length of their head and body alone typically ranges from 21 inches for females to 25 inches for males, excluding their long, powerful tails, of course. But when considering their full length, it's a whole different ballgame, because when one includes the tail, some individuals have been known to reach extraordinary lengths. In fact, the maximum recorded total length of a Nile monitor lizard is a staggering 94 inches, or about 7.8 feet. This makes them one of the largest lizards in the world. Their formidable size, combined with their aggressive behavior and sharp claws and teeth, underscores the inherent danger that they pose, especially when it comes to keeping them as pets in a domestic setting, which means that these carnivores are definitely not your typical household pets. Huff's fascination with monitor lizards extended beyond simply keeping them as pets. he went to great lengths to replicate their natural feeding habits right in his home. In the wild, monitor lizards are known to be carnivorous, often found feeding on smaller animals, and Huff would cater to this natural dietary preference of theirs by feeding them raw chicken and mimicking the kind of meat that they'd consume in their natural habitats. But he didn't stop there. He also introduced Madagascar hissing cockroaches into their diet. These large insects, measuring about 2 to 3 inches long and native to the island of Madagascar, are known for their unique defense mechanism of emitting a hissing sound, hence their name, and they would go on to serve as a form of live prey for the lizards, adding an element of the hunt to their feeding routine. These unique feeding habits would go on to turn his home into a mini zoo, with lizards chasing after their prey, much like they would in the wild. A specialized animal removal team was then summoned to the scene, their arrival prompting a few sighs of relief from authorities and concerned neighbors. As the specialists cautiously entered the house, they would be met with a series of aggressive hisses as the lizards, agitated by the intrusion, resisted their capture attempts fiercely, their scaly bodies writhing and thrashing in protest. Amidst the chaos, however, one lizard stood out. Its face was smeared with blood, and its eyes filled with a menacing glint. With an aura of menace unmatched by the others, it displayed a level of aggression that sent shivers down the spines of even the most seasoned members of the team of specialists, many of whom had years of experience dealing with dangerous situations involving a myriad of wild animals. And it was this particular lizard that was found chewing on Huff's face when the officers initially arrived at the scene. The animal removal team fought tooth and nail to subdue the aggressive lizards, their training and expertise tested to the limit. And finally, after a relentless struggle, they managed to capture and safely remove the reptiles from the premises. The battle had been won, but the price had already been paid. Ronald's life had been tragically cut short, his body bearing the marks of a gruesome struggle, and the side of his face, partially consumed by one of his own pets, would forever be etched in the memories of those who bore witness. Reports would indicate that Huff's cheeks had been eaten off. The monitors had also eaten his face and even some of his internal organs. Investigative reports would later suggest that Huff was bitten by one or more of his pets a week or two before his death, bites that led to a staph infection, a type of bacterial infection that causes serious health problems if left untreated. And unfortunately, the reports would also indicate that it appeared that Huff did not seek medical treatment following the bites, an ultimately fatal lapse in judgment. The reports would also mention that since Huff kept his apartment at a high temperature, around 80 degrees, to accommodate the lizards' natural preference for warm climates, the combination of the serious infection and a high ambient temperature likely exacerbated his condition, leading to his untimely death and its grisly aftermath, when the very lizards that he'd for years cared for began to feast on his dead body. Some investigators suggested that the lizards, driven by their predatory instincts, perhaps confused or distressed by the death of their caretaker, were forced to turn to the only available food source in their confined environment, leading them to turn to his body for sustenance. What makes these lizards particularly dangerous to humans is not just their physical prowess, but also their biological makeup. Nile monitors have extremely sharp teeth and claws. Their mouths also host a variety of deadly bacteria. And while these bacteria are not necessarily fatal to humans, they can still cause serious infections if a person is bitten or if their blood is somehow exposed to it. And in Huff's case, it was concluded that a bite from one of his lizards led to the aforementioned staph infection, combined with the high temperature in his apartment, once again likely contributed to his death. In the aftermath of the attack, an autopsy would fail to determine whether the monitors, ranging up to 6 feet in length, had killed their owner. Nonetheless, this shocking incident would go on to shed light on the ever-expanding international market for exotic pets. Around the same time of Huff's tragic passing, the Miami office of the United States Fish and Wildlife Service intercepted a shipment from Benin in West Africa. The cargo contained 2,000 reptiles and invertebrates, including 600 scorpions, raising concerns about the validity of the export permits. This single seizure was but just a drop in the ocean of the exotic pet trade, with over 8,000 legal animal shipments arriving in the United States in the past year alone, and countless others slipping through undetected. It's well known that the internet serves as a marketplace for a staggering array of exotic animals. From baboons to big cats, or primates to reptiles, the demand for these wild creatures seems insatiable, and one of the reasons for the allure lies in their untamed nature, untouched by domestication like traditional pets. The pet reptile industry alone accounts for approximately 2.5 million annual imports, highlighting the immense scale of the trade. The estimated value of the entire industry, in fact, reaches tens of billions of dollars each year, making it a lucrative business. However, the ecological, social, and health costs associated with the trade are often overlooked, as the impact of exotic pet trade extends far beyond the financial figures. Habitat loss, species extinction, disruption of ecosystems, and of course introductions to pathogens also pose significant threats. And many animals perish even during the capture and transportation process, with mortality rates as high as 90% for some species during these events. To this day, it remains unclear whether his monitors killed Ronald Huff or if he died naturally and was then devoured by the free-roaming creatures. What is clear, however, is that the line between fascination and danger was blurred, and not to mention crossed, leading to a tragic end to an incident that would end up being a chilling testament to the unpredictable nature of the wild. A stark reminder that even in the confines of our homes, natural rules still apply. And as we close this episode, I leave you with this thought. In the dance between man and beast, the music can stop at any moment, and when it does, it's survival of the fittest. Robert L. Pamprin was a 33-year-old engineer at Convair Astronautics Division. Not only was he a man of science and precision, he was also an adventurer at heart. Residing at the Bayard Place in Pacific Beach, Robert's life was a blend of technical blueprints and the vast expanse of the ocean. His wife Carolyn often watched him from their home, her heart swelling with pride and at times a hint of worry. Growing up, Robert had always been drawn to water. His prowess as a swimmer was well known, and his stint as a lifeguard only solidified his reputation. But for Pamprin, it wasn't always just about swimming. It was the thrill of freediving and the allure of the mysteries that lay beneath the waves that truly captivated him. For years, he had been a skin diver, exploring the underwater world with a passion that few could match. The sun was high in the sky on June 14th of 1959, casting shimmering reflections on the water of La Jolla Cove, California. The picturesque alligator head stood sentinel, its rocky facade overlooking the vast expanse of the Pacific. The cove, with its azure waters, was a haven for divers, and that day was no different. Pamprin, who at this point was an experienced freediver with a penchant for abalone, was exploring the underwater world with his diving partner Gerald Lehrer. The two had shared countless dives, their camaraderie evident in the silent and efficient way that they communicated beneath the waves. The ocean's depths held many treasures on that day, and the pair had hopes of nabbing some of them in the form of elusive mollusks. As they dove deeper, the world around them transformed. The play of light through the water painted a surreal picture, with marine life darting in and out of the rocky crevices. But amidst this serenity, little did the pair know that the unexpected lurked. Suddenly, a shadow loomed large, cutting through the water's dappled sunlight. Gerald, who was just a few meters away from Pamprin, would suddenly hear a muffled cry for help, which is when he would turn to see a sight that would haunt him forever. Lehrer watched in horror as his friend was being lifted out of the water, his silhouette framed against the sun, and the massive creature, its size dwarfing a helpless Pamprin, had seized him between its jaws. From a distance, onlooker William Abbots, perched on a rock formation, watched as the horrific scene unfolded, his heart pounding and adrenaline rushing as the once tranquil atmosphere of the cove was evidently shattered. A brave and courageous Lehrer, in a desperate attempt to save his friend, would then swim as fast as he could towards Pamprin, but of course Lehrer was no match for one of the ocean's most formidable predators, as the massive white shark was relentless, causing Lehrer to lose hope with each passing second. The struggle was intense as the water churned with bubbles and a growing crimson hue. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, it was all over, and the great white, with Pamprin in its mouth, would disappear into the abyss, only leaving behind a haunting silence. News of the attack would spread like wildfire, with local authorities and divers combing the area. But Robert Pamprin was never found, and the cove with its beauty and allure would go on to hold a somber memory, a reminder of the unpredictable nature of the ocean, as well as the mysteries it conceals. After Gerard Lehrer and William Abbots had witnessed the horrifying incident, 10 scuba divers were sent out to look for the corpse, but unfortunately their efforts were unsuccessful, and they were not able to find any remains of Robert. And much like some other shark attacks that we've covered, sometimes the shark finishes off every single bit of the human, and it's not always a case where a shark bites somebody and then just lets them bleed out, and it's a case of mistaken identity. Now, this is not to bash sharks, but these things can happen and precautions must be taken. On a cloudy Sunday afternoon on December 7th of 1952, the Pacific Ocean off Point Olan, known to locals as Lover's Point in Monterey County, California, was anything but romantic. The waters were murky, with visibility reduced to a mere 1 or 2 meters, thanks to the aftermath of an overnight rainstorm and a dense plankton bloom. The sea temperature was a chilly 12.7 degrees Celsius, and the unpredictable underwater world as usual, shrouded in mystery. Barry Wilson, a spirited 16-year-old, was out swimming with his friend Bruckner Brady Jr., who was a year younger. The two were about 25 meters from the shore, with the water around them plunging to a depth of about 5 fathoms. As they swam, the unexpected would suddenly happen, as a shadowy figure emerged from the depths, targeting Wilson. Brady, witnessing the horror, swam as fast as he could toward his friend, unsheathing his knife in a desperate attempt to fend off the shark. He would then attempt continuous stabs at the predator, but the knife was soon knocked from his grasp. Resorting to his bare hands, Brady fought desperately to free his friend, and after what felt like an eternity, the shark would finally release its grip and disappear into the opaque. From the shore, John C. Bassford, a bystander, had a clear view of the unfolding drama. He watched in horror as Barry was lifted out of the water by the force of the attack, desperately trying to fend off the shark, as the water around them turned a bloody shade of red. Members of the Sea Otter Dive Club who were nearby would then rush to the rescue. They placed Wilson on an inner tube, trying to get him to safety, but the shark was relentless, making several passes at the injured boy, even as rescuers tried to fend it off. And by the time they reached shore, it was tragically too late, as Barry's injuries proved fatal, with the most severe being a massive wound on his right thigh. The attack was attributed once again to a great white shark, estimated to be around 4 meters in length. The sun was casting a gentle glow over Surf Beach on that fateful day, a picturesque spot nestled in the Pacific Ocean off the coast of Hamlet of Surf. Located just west of Lompoc on the Vandenberg Air Force Base in Santa Barbara County, California, the beach was a favorite among locals and tourists alike. But on the fateful morning of October 22, 2010, the peaceful ambiance of the beach was disrupted. Lucas McCain Ransom, a vibrant 19-year-old from Romulan, California, was out on the waves riding his red bodyboard. A junior in chemical engineering at UC Santa Barbara, Lucas was passionate about the ocean as well as the thrill of bodyboarding. Donning his black swim fins and a black and red board leash, he also looked every bit the seasoned surfer. Accompanying him was his close friend, 20-year-old Matthew Garcia, and the two were by all accounts inseparable, previously having shared many adventures both in and out of the water. As they rode the 8 to 10 foot waves, the atmosphere was exhilarating. Little did the pair realize, however, that they were being watched by an unexpected guest from the waters just below them. A few moments then passed when, without a warning, a massive shadow suddenly surged from the depths, straight toward Ransom. The helpless 19-year-old was then gripped by a force so powerful that it lifted him off his board. Garcia, who was just a few feet away, watched in horror as a massive white shark, estimated to be around 17 to 18 feet in length, clamped its jaws onto Lucas's left leg. A desperate struggle between life and death would then ensue. Garcia, who at this point was driven by sheer adrenaline, would bravely attempt to reach his friend, but the force of the waves and the sheer intimidating size of the shark made this extremely difficult. As the water turned a haunting shade of red, Ransom's also red bodyboard would then rise to the surface, painting a picture that seemed like it was straight out of a horror movie. Garcia, with a heavy heart, would manage to bring Ransom to the shore with the help of 2 witnesses. And despite their attempts at rescue, his injuries would prove too severe, as he had sustained a massive bite to his left leg, leading to severe blood loss. The aftermath of the tragedy was profound. Vandenberg Air Force Base would close Surf Beach and its neighboring beaches for 72 hours. The community mourned the loss of a bright young soul, and Lucas's memory was immortalized with a Lucas Ransom Memorial Scholarship at UC Santa Barbara. The scholarship, a beacon of hope, is annually awarded to students who embodied Lucas's passion for helping others and making a difference. The ocean, with its vast expanse and mysterious depths, is home to a myriad of creatures, each playing a unique role in maintaining the balance of its intricate ecosystems. Among these, sharks, who are often misunderstood and feared, stand out as apex predators, ensuring the health and vitality of our oceans. Despite the frightful nature of this documentary, it's important we don't paint a dark picture of these magnificent ocean predators. Sharks play a pivotal role as apex predators in maintaining the balance of marine ecosystems. They regulate the populations of species below them in the food chain, which are quite aplenty, ensuring a healthy diversity of marine life. Also, by preying on the weak and the sick, sharks help to strengthen the gene pools of their prey, leading to healthier populations of marine creatures. Not to mention, they're also known as the guardians of the coral reefs. They indirectly protect these reefs, which are vital for marine biodiversity, as the loss of sharks can lead to an increase in larger predatory fish, such as groupers, who in turn play their role by feeding on herbivores that keep algae in check. And without these herbivores, algae can overtake coral reefs, leading to their decline. It's also important to note that the presence or absence of sharks can have ripple effects on local economies. For instance, the decline in base gallops due to the loss of sharks once led to the closure of a fishery in North Carolina, not only demonstrating the interconnectedness of marine life, but also its impact on human livelihoods. On the flip side, living sharks can boost local economies through ecotourism. For instance, in places like the Bahamas, a single live reef shark can be worth up to $250,000 due to dive tourism, compared to a one-time value of $50 if caught by a fisherman. Not to mention, sharks also serve as indicators of ocean health, which means a decline in shark populations can signal larger issues with marine ecosystems, such as overfishing or habitat degradation. So with all this in mind, it's important that we note that while sharks can pose dangers to humans, it's essential to understand that unprovoked attacks are rare, and most sharks are in fact not interested in humans as prey. So by playing our role and understanding and respecting their behavior, as well as their habitats, it's certainly possible for a healthy coexistence between us and these prehistoric ocean predators. In the unassuming village of Mfuwe, Zambia, a sinister, true tale of terror and survival lingers beneath the surface. The small town often serves as a quick stop for tourists traveling to the famous South Luangwa Wildlife Park. But little do many know that this village was once tormented by a devious and merciless apex predator. Back in 1991, the people of the village of Mfuwe faced their darkest days when a maneless male lion, measuring an astonishing 10.5 feet in length, unleashed a reign of terror upon them. Over the course of 2 gruesome months, this menacing predator would ruthlessly claim the lives of 6 innocent villagers, leaving a trail of devastation in its wake. This is the horrifying true tale of what would become known as one of the most infamous man-eating lion cases in African history. The Mfuwe Maneater's relentless attacks, seemingly unprovoked and devoid of mercy, struck the small town's villagers with a sense of awe and terror that left them questioning the very nature of an animal that they believed to, for the most part, have had a good understanding of. The sheer size of this particular lion, combined with its cunning, and not to mention its brutal killing methods, would over time go on to lead many to believe that this was no ordinary big cat. Not to mention, its intelligent evasion of traps, poisons, and hunting parties added an air of mystique to the creature, while its brazen willingness to strike in broad daylight at that served to amplify their horrors. It was a warm summer evening on July 9th of 1991. 2 young boys were making their way home along a rural path. Suddenly, a massive lion pounced out of the shadows and seized one of the boys, while the other took off in a panic. The lone surviving boy would then reach the village as quick as he could, but by the time armed men arrived, there was little left to be found but shreds of clothing and fragments of bone and flesh. This gruesome incident was only the beginning of a series of brutal attacks. Less than a month later, a woman who resided on the outskirts of the village was dragged from her hut and brutally devoured by the wild animal. All that remained were her head and her arms, which to the discoverers of this gruesome sight would become etched in their minds as a chilling testament to this lion's savage nature. The following night, another young boy would be attacked and forcibly taken away from the village, and this was right in the view of a ranger station. Despite a warning shot being fired by one of the rangers, the lion did not release its prey until it reached a safe location. The boy would then be rushed to the hospital in critical condition, but tragically, he too would fall victim to the Mfuwe lion's rampage. As the attacks persisted, the lion displayed even more extraordinary cunning and audacity. It began invading homes to seize its victims, evading all traps to capture or kill it. As days went by, yet another horrifying incident would present itself when the lion attacked and killed a woman named Jocelyn, snatching her from the porch of her village right in front of a ranger patrol that was out searching for the predator. The rangers were powerless to prevent the brutal attack, but what happened next was even more audacious. The very next day, the lion returned to Jocelyn's residence, seemingly to collect a memento. The bold big cat casually walked into the house, picked up a laundry sack in its jaws, and then strolled out to the center of the town, while terrified onlookers watched in horror. The lion then let out a defiant, deafening roar, put down the sack, picked it back up again, and then vanished into the woods. This brazen behavior sent shockwaves through the community and left the people trembling with fear. The lion even began carrying around the aforementioned laundry sack stolen from Jesline's home, adding even more horrible rumors to its legend that the sack may have been cursed, and that this lion, much like the legendary lions of Tsavo and Nyombe, was a supernatural being. At this point, an immensely dark cloud of fear and superstition gripped the village. As the death toll mounted, whispers of the supernatural began to circulate throughout the village. Could this man-eating lion be a demonic entity or a malevolent spirit bent on sowing chaos and destruction? Or perhaps it was the incarnation of a vengeful witch doctor, a shape-shifting shaman who had taken the form of a lion to exact a terrible price from the villagers? Is that what this was? Chilling questions such as these, combined with the uncertainty of when and where the lion would strike next, created an atmosphere of dread and despair that seemed to now cling to the entire village of Mfuwe like a shroud. Desperate for answers and protection, the villagers then turned to their spiritual leaders, seeking guidance and solace from the terrible specter that had descended upon them. Adrian Carr, another local safari hunter who attempted to kill the lion, had a notable and extremely unnerving encounter that even made him, a well-esteemed man in his field, to question the very wisdom of his endeavor. In fact, he was quoted saying,
"He came soon after midnight, or at least that's when I first became aware of him. I could hear his footfall circling my paper bag fortress. My 2 heavy rifles, 3 flashlights and a handgun were little comfort. It went quiet for a bit, and then I heard him feeding on the bait. I let him settle into the feeding for 20 minutes, and then put the light on him. I still have the mental image of him standing up on his hind legs, very big and tall, maneless and pale. I was ready to shoot, but the instant the light hit him, he dropped and was gone. He never came back. Too late, however, to do anything else if I was to retain my casual demeanor and reputation of aloof imperturbability and disdain for the magical beliefs that are always associated with man-eating lions. Privately, of course, I was seriously doubting the wisdom of the whole enterprise."
Carr's encounter with the beast was unsettling, but would ultimately, like those before him, wind up unsuccessful. With the death toll mounting, Californian Wayne Hosek and professional hunter Charles Bukis were called in to end the Maneater of Mfuwe's reign of terror. The hunters began conversing with villagers to understand the lion's habits and patterns of attack. They learned about the creature's cherished laundry bag, a vital piece of information for their pursuit, and as luck would have it, the duo would end up finding the laundry sack in a dry riverbed. Hosek noted in his journal that even the hornbills lounging nearby seemed to avoid the bag, taking this as a sign that the lion was nearby. They at this point would construct a hideout and place bait around the area. Despite hearing the lion's chuffing, roaring, and stalking, it would still continue to evade them, and over the following days, they changed the hideout's location multiple times, but even then to no avail. The tension and fear would continue to grow, at which point the aforementioned hunter Wayne Hosek would share his thoughts and concerns with his companion Willie.
"We knew he could be seeing us at any time, and we felt his presence whether in his hunting area or returning to camp, several miles away. It was as if a spirit were around, continually watching us. By this we felt that we had come to know this lion in a most strange and peculiar way. We were all near exhaustion. Sleep was out of the question. It was simply futile to try. I had come to hunt, and it was this very fact that we perhaps clung to and acted out, in order to convince ourselves that he was not controlling our lives. What, I asked, would happen should this lion decide to come into the blind and confront us? Willie's response seemed so logical that it made perfect sense to me, and it put me completely at ease about such an attack. He said simply, "If he comes in blind, there will be 3 guns waiting for him and he will be killed." With that, I never gave it a second thought. However, he apparently did give it many thoughts himself, as he later told me he never closed his eyes because he considered that to be a real possibility with this lion being a man-eater. He didn't want to give the lion even an instant of advantage.
The lion proved to be incredibly elusive and cunning, often snatching bait right under their noses while they were relocating. In fact, on one occasion, It even managed to retrieve its precious laundry bag, and both day and night, the lion would then be spotted, circling them, cleverly determining the best angle of approach to reach the hideout without being spotted. The lion began frequently taunting the hunters, all while seemingly possessing a supernatural ability to evade them. It would not be until one fateful day, 2 months into his rampage, that Hosek would miraculously stumble upon the elusive Maneater. Hosek would note that it looked like it had been laying on the ground as if it were asleep. Hosek warily observed the situation, but still couldn't bring himself any closer, keeping his distance. Approximately 30 minutes would then pass before Hosek finally musters enough courage to quietly approach the lion from behind and manage to put a bullet in its head, ending what was a rampage that costed the lives of 6 innocent villagers. Today, the Mfuwe Maneater is displayed in the Field Museum in Chicago, serving as a haunting reminder of the harrowing events that unfolded in the Zambian village in 1991. The story of the Mfuwe Maneater isn't just about a rogue lion. It's a tale of human determination, resilience, and the eternal struggle between man and nature. Ultimately, it's a powerful testament to the ability of small African villages to come together and triumph in the face of unimaginable terror. The villagers of Mfuwe were overjoyed and relieved upon hearing the news that the man-eater was slayed. They would celebrate their victory by spitting on the lion's carcass, beating it with sticks, and lighting it on fire to express their joy. The end of the man-eater's reign brought peace back to the village of Mfuwe, but the chilling memory of the events that transpired would remain with them forever.